Thank you, Dr. Liliana Ruta, for that wonderful speech. I would now like to invite Dr. Ronald Leaf on stage. Ronald Leaf is a licensed psychologist who began his career working with Ivar Lovaas in 1973 while receiving his undergraduate degree at University of California, LA. Subsequently, he received his doctorate under the direction of Dr. Lovaas. He has consulted to families, schools, day programs, and residential facilities on a national and international basis. Dr. Leaf is a director of Autism Partnership and has published extensively in research journals. He's also the co-founder and director of Autism Partnership. Let's welcome Dr. Ronald Leaf on stage.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me come. It's a pleasure to be part of this workshop. All right. Gotta wait a second. So my first slide, because I have 30 minutes, is I'm apologizing to start with. I want to apologize because I'm an angry man. I'm old, I'm passionate, and I'm angry about the field of ABA. I'm mad about the field of autism. I'm mad because there's tremendous misinformation, continuously. I've heard misinformation during this conference about the Lovaas project. I've heard misinformation about ABA, and I want to clarify, at least from my perspective, how I view ABA and how I view what my work has been. So, let me start with my background. Oh, is it not working? Okay. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, and that's my first slides. I went to UCLA as an undergraduate student because my dad went to UCLA. I loved UCLA sports, so that's where I went. I thought I was going to be an attorney. That was my path. I was a political science major. It was my junior year at UCLA. And I needed a class on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2 to 3:15. And you might go, why do you need a class on Tuesdays and Thursdays at that time? Well, that way I only had to go to school 2 days a week. I didn't want to go 5 days a week. So there were two classes that seemed of interest. One was an art history class, and one was a psychology class. I took the psychology class called Foundations of Behavior Modification because my sister-in-law, who was a psychology major, said Ivar Lovaas was an evil man. He did evil work. And I was intrigued. I had to take that class, so I took the class. Changed my career, decided not to be an attorney, I wanted to be a psychologist. I started off at UCLA in the ivory tower. What I mean by ivory tower is we had a large grant from the National Institute of Mental Health to see under best practice conditions, what could you do in the treatment of autism? This was 1973, let me remind you. So we didn't have high functioning children with autism, incredibly impacted group, and so we did work under best practice conditions. That meant intensity. It meant that we did year-long treatment. Intensity, by the way, just a little clarification, was not a minimum of 40 hours a week whatsoever. It was an average of 40 hours a week. It ranged from 18 hours to 60 hours. The mean was about 25 hours a week. We did that kind of work with a lot of money and a lot of staff, best practice conditions. I want to show you a video of the first child I ever supervised under best practice conditions. This was how he presented at 30 months of age when we started treatment. Diagnostically, he was independently diagnosed with autism, had tremendous severe self-injurious behaviors, non-compliance, stereotypies, no receptive language, no expressive language, no social interest, and an IQ of 65, which is remarkable because I don't know how he got that IQ of 65, but nonetheless, that was an independent evaluation that he had that. This is him, a film of his journey.
He ignored and looked past people. He spun objects, flapped his hands, laughed excessively and inappropriately, and assumed fixed and rigid body positions for prolonged periods of time. With intensive treatment, Ian's IQ at follow-up rose more than 40 points to the normal range.
Well, when we found out about his problems, we were told that he would probably be institutionalized at some point in his life. And we couldn't accept that, really. And it was grueling, really. I mean, because it was, I would say about 5 years that the therapy, 2 years very intensive therapy, another 3 of consistent, hard therapy, and you could see him daily changing. That's what kept you going.
Here, 5 years after treatment, Ian is indistinguishable from his friends.
What do you want to do when you grow up? There's a lot of things. I want to be a jet pilot, jet designer, or an architect. I want to be an actor and a keyboard player and a surfer. Yeah, that'd be cool to be a keyboard player, especially you since you're so good at the keyboard. Do you think college is going to be fun? Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. Yeah. That's where you usually find your girls that you marry. When are you going to get married? I don't know, but I don't want to get married right now, even if I was able to, because it doesn't seem fun right now, you know. Probably after college. That'd be a cool time. Yeah. About 24, I'd say. Year after I move out. That's going to be me and all those parties too at college. Oh yeah. Get to drink beer and everything, sneak the booze.
So he did remarkably clearly, and he wasn't the only child that did that. Out of 19 children we treated with intensity, 9 children achieved those outcomes. So at the end of the outcome, he no longer presented with autism. His language was in the normal range, no interfering behaviors. IQ was in the meaningful friendships, and IQ was around 108 for him in the normal range. But that was the ivory tower. That's totally impractical. That's not sustainable. So I went on this journey of practicality when I left UCLA. My journey started at Camarillo State Hospital. There was a time in the 70s when most children with autism, adolescents and adults, went to state institutions. So I wanted to go in there and see, what could you do? How could you AB under those conditions? I decided to work with adults who had been their whole lives there, adults that were incredibly impacted. It was incredibly helpful for me to do that, to change my perspective of what ABA could be like. Then I worked in classrooms. I wanted to see what that was like. So I worked in a self-contained classroom with 15 children to see, how do you do AB under those conditions? Perhaps one of those valuable things I did, I lived with a child with autism. I wanted to see what that was like. Because parents would say, you don't know how it is until you live with it. And I wanted that experience. Up to that point, I used to talk about consistency, how important that was. You have to be consistent from the time they wake up to they go to bed. When I lived with it, I realized that's not possible. That's not sustainable whatsoever. You have to become practical. Then I made a decision. I wanted to live with adults and see what that was like, but with other disabilities, not only autism. So this was me as a young undergraduate student living with adults with autism, Asperger's, Prader-Willi syndrome, schizophrenia, intellectual disabilities, to see, how do you do that? Does ABA work across ages and populations? And indeed it does. Then I made a decision. I wanted to work with normal neurotic adults like me. I want to work with people with anxiety disorders and mood disorders and marital issues and see, how do you take ABA into that kind of environment. I worked with a psychoanalytic advisor, which is incredibly beneficial to me to see a different approach. But at the end of the day, I was doing ABA. I put in terms of my career is coaching baseball. I've coached baseball from T-ball to high school because I think when I'm coaching, I'm also doing ABA. I'm doing ABA as a father, a husband, and a grandfather. I think because of these experiences, it makes me quite different in the delivery of services. When you work with ages from 6 months to 70-year-olds, when you work across populations, when you work in homes and clinics and schools and hospitals, agencies, it makes you different. And my comment is that not all ABA is alike. I've heard lots of things about ABA like it's under one roof. It's so different. It's like saying all politicians are alike. Mother Teresa is very similar to Donald Trump because they're leaders. That's absurd. Not all doctors are alike, not all speech pathologists are alike, and not all ABA is alike. There's vast differences, vast. Not all restaurants are alike. You got your food carts, you got your McDonald's, and you got your fine dining experiences. They all serve food. They're not all alike. Not all ABA is alike. You've got your rigid, traditional kinds of approaches, and you've got a progressive approach. And I want to talk about the progressive approach and what makes it and the differences between them. For example, just training. tragically, most training within ABA is very limited. It's time limited. 1 week, maybe 2 weeks. That's absurd to me. Training needs to be performance-based. Just like surgeons are performance-based and cooks are performance-based, ABA needs to be performance-based, not based on time, based on skill and quality. Supervision needs to be plentiful. It can't just be 1 hour weekly. We've got to keep on training. Once we train our staff, it never stops. For me, training never stops. I've done this for 47 years. I'm still getting trained all the time. It's necessary. Staffing ratios. I've heard that ABA is a one-on-one therapy. Really? Is it? Unfortunately, it's practiced that way too often. It needs to be small group and large group. That's good ABA because we need generalization and we need our kids to be able to learn under those conditions. It may be small one-on-one and small groups to start with, but we have to rapidly transition into group work. Expectations. When I see traditional models and I see other kinds of treatments, the expectations are so woefully low. My expectations are incredibly high, no matter what age I'm working with. When I've got a 5-year-old, my expectation, and most of our kids come to our clinic have no language whatsoever, my expectation is they're going to be fully conversational. My expectation is that they're going to have meaningful friendships. That's my expectation. Do all get there? No, not all get there, but a large percent do. When I worked in the adult world, and I was doing deinstitutionalization, so violent adults impacted coming from state hospitals, my expectation was they're going to live independently. My expectation is they're going to work independently. That was my expectation. And I think that's too low. I expect that students of all ages can learn with distractions, complete distractions. I believe students of all ages can learn with auditory input, don't just need visual. I believe accommodations only need to be a necessary means at best. My expectations are just much higher within the field and within ABA. We talk about the gap. This line represents an IQ of 100. This is typically what you see with children with autism without quality intervention. And I think it's really important to look at this because the gap gets larger clearly over time. But the other thing to note is progress is being made regardless. And so many people that are doing treatment are really proud of what they're doing because progress is being made, but it's not meaningful progress. Our kids are much more capable than that. Our adolescents, our adults. This is what our data showed from a study we did in 2011. In 70% of the time, we were able to eliminate the gap completely. And that meant, by the way, eliminating the gap, they graduated from school without support. They didn't have supports in their classrooms. Normal IQs, normal language no longer presented with autism. 70%. Another difference is the curriculum. And this has been referred to throughout, once again. Good ABA, and again, there's a distinction. Sadly, most ABA is not very good. Good ABA is not a cookbook. It's highly individualized. Every program is different because every child is different. But I like to say, actually, children with autism are like snowflakes. Snowflakes, tremendous differences, but there is commonality. We need to individualize what we do. We need to be a holistic approach that treats the whole child. We're not just working on behavior and language. We're working on recreation, play, self-help, and most importantly, socialization. Differences has to do with just reinforcers. Good ABA is well beyond food as a reinforcer. We're working for socialization, engagement, and finally, internalization. ABA difference in terms of how we teach. I hear all the time, discrete trial teaching is ABA. No, it's not. It's one tiny aspect. It's an instructional format. ABA includes discrete trial teaching. It includes continuous teaching. It includes teaching interaction procedures. It is a natural approach if done correctly. Teachers' instructions. I'm so turned off with the most ABA where the teachers sound like robots. They use one-word phrases. They never vary it. And then we say, well, why do children with autism sound like robots? Because they're being taught by robots. We need to be natural in what we do. Treatment settings. We're a big fan of clinic-based as opposed to home-based. Why clinic-based? Because they're around kids all day long. Why clinic-based? Because we can train our staff all day long. Why clinic-based? It creates an environment, a culture for our families and our children. ABA should be evidence-based. There's a survey we did among BCBAs that 20% of BCBAs are using non-evidence-based procedures. They're using social stories, that's not evidence-based, social thinking, not evidence-based, sensory integration, not evidence-based. As behaviorists, as clinicians, as people that are trying to change children's lives, adults and adults, we need to be evidence-based. I like this slide from Autism Speaks. Children are not guinea pigs. See, tragically in autism, there used to be the cure of the year. Every year there's a cure of autism. Then it became a flavor of the month. Today it's the panacea of the week. We've got to be careful. We've got to use evidence. And there are so many things out there that just simply aren't evidence-based. There's good aspects to them perhaps, but they're not evidence-based. There's maybe slight procedural things, but you look at sensory integration as an example, it is not an evidence-based procedure. It's just simply not. Do kids with autism have sensory issues? Absolutely. That's a definition of it. But the function of the behavior and the treatment is a very different thing. And if you look at the literature, you will see that these are not evidence-based for the most part. What is evidence-based is ABA. And by evidence-based, what I mean is it appears in a reputable journal. It's a peer-reviewed journal, and ideally a double-blind peer-reviewed journal. Independent evaluations are used, standard and valid tests are used, that there's research design, not case studies, not testimonials, and that's statistically significant. This is evidence-based. This is the definition, at least from my perspective, is evidence-based. The last thing that in our model, and there's many other things, is using clinical judgment. And let me kind of define that. Tragically, most people in this field that are doing ABA do strict protocols. They don't deviate whatsoever, and they're quite proud of being protocol-driven. But the problem is our kids don't read the protocols. We need to change. We need to use clinical judgment. When we first used that in journals, we got rejected nonstop. You can't use clinical judgment. Yes, you can. We can operationally define that. That doesn't mean we're arbitrary. It means we're making decisions moment to moment. We're changing our strategies moment to moment because the children change moment to moment. Clinical judgment, this is someone that used clinical judgment. This is Captain Sully, who saved a plane by landing on the Hudson River. If he follows strict protocols, they would all die. He needed to change what he did based upon the circumstances. He had to exert clinical judgment. This man used clinical judgment too. This is a film about two cricket players from India who went to the United States. And Tom House was their coach. Tom House is an amazing coach. He coached my son as a pitcher. Tom House uses clinical judgment in teaching. Ivar Lovaas used clinical judgment. Outside is the sign that said if a child cannot learn the way we teach, we must teach in the way the child can learn. That meant we changed all the time. There was such a misunderstanding of what we did at UCLA. Such a misunderstanding. We did not have strict protocols whatsoever. We didn't have strict protocols on the number of hours. We didn't have strict protocols on reinforcement. We changed second by second. Because this was Ivar's mantra. You got to continual change. Don't do the same thing. Clinical judgment means to me, these are just some variables we have to take into account every single second. The child's health, how persistent are their current motivation. Because this changes what we do. Based upon these states for our children, we're going to have to make changes of reinforcers. What kind of reinforcers are we going to use at this second based upon where they are that second? The schedules of reinforcement, the complexity of the instruction, the prompting strategies. There's just not one prompting strategy. There's a whole host, and we have to change that, adjust that second by second by second. And our prompts we use, and this is just an example of what we need to do. We need to use clinical judgment. We have to do in the moment assessment and not use strict protocols. And again, tragically, most ABA just doesn't do that. But that doesn't mean ABA is bad. ABA is neither good or bad. It's how it's implemented is what it comes down to. And let's get away from generalizing ABA as one thing, because it's just not. Not all ABA is alike. These are the different routes we can go with an ABA. I want to show you another child and show you his therapy that demonstrates ABA. He's one of those 70%ers. He came to us from Kuwait at 19 months of age. Little bitty boy, darling little boy. Diagnostically, they weren't sure. Autism, intellectual disability. Interfering behaviors, quite a few. Receptive language, none. Expressive language, none. Social interest, none. IQ, untestable. Here he is at his intake at 19 months of age.
Yeah, nice work. All done. Sit down. No, sit down. That's it. Good. Yay! Good. You did it. Good looking. All done. All done. Wow! What a big boy! That was great. Sit down. No. Sit down. Yeah, that's the way. All done. See ya. Yeah, that's the way. All done. You did it. Bye. All done.
This is him at 6 months into treatment. Nothing miraculous. It's a process. By the way, he loves animals. That's his favorite thing. All right, I don't think we're going to see 6 months. So let's jump to a year.
Copy me. Oh. Good. E. Oh. Nice looking. Yeah. Way to go. Hey, copy me. Z. E. E. B. Good. That was good talking, but now you're ready. Copy me. You are really looking. Way to go. Let's try some words. Are you ready? Copy me. Octopus. Octopus. Good. How about giraffe? And try this one. Banana. Yeah. Banana. There you go. You're trying. Nice going, bud.
Here he is, still at 1 year.
You're right. Baba, good talking. Giraffe. Juice. Nice telling me, mister. Nice talking.
He goes back to Kuwait. Here he is at 3 years of treatment.
Say them fast or slow?
No.
Okay, we'll do a couple slow and then we'll do some really fast. Okay?
Okay. Ice
Okay, now let's go fast.
Balloons, plate,
What is that?
boom,
Yeah.
TV, donut, cat, bed, bird, spoon, flowers, ball, apple, bike, zippers, handles,
Hold on, what is this?
and then this is it.
Shoe.
Soup, cookies, and then this is it.
How do you not know what this is?
Is that elevator?
No, it's not an elevator. It's a chair.
Two,
This is a chair.
back, flowers, pee-pee, towel, book, suit, car.
And here he is currently.
Welcome back to
He had to make a
Minecraft
video for his class.
tutorial. I'll be teaching you how to make a working garage door. So the commands will be in the description if you want to see them, because we're going to use command blocks. And make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to never miss any of my videos. To place our buttons and our signs, right, open on that column and close on that column. Then after that, I'll place stone bricks on top of them, and then you are done.
So today, where is he at? Diagnostically, he doesn't present any longer with ASD. In terms of language or behavior, he's cheeky with his brother. He bugs his brother, which we love. He doesn't bug him too much, just enough. Age level in terms of language, both receptive, expressive, meaningful friendships, lots of friendships. Too many. His problem in class, by the way, is in school, no supports whatsoever. The teachers complain with him. He's above age grade level. He just talks too much to friends. Nice problem to have. IQ in the normal range. These are my expectations. This can happen with autism. Adults, when I was in the adult world, most of our clients that came from state hospitals end up living in apartments by themselves. They had friendships. In terms of my career, I've gone to graduations, college graduations, and seen people get married. It absolutely can happen. We've got, if we do quality treatment. This is one of my favorite movies. It's Gwyneth Paltrow's one of her early movies called Sliding Doors. The premise is that she misses a subway by 1 second. The door slides closed. And it tracks her life two ways, if she had made it versus missed it. This is what keeps me up at night. Kids, adolescents, adults, the decisions already made in terms of treatment. It's a sliding door. They go into the wrong treatment, their life will forever be compromised. We can do so much more. Our children, our adolescents, our adults are so incredibly capable, but it takes the right treatment to get them there. I want to then conclude, good timing, about a little bit of information about what we did at UCLA and clarify. At least I can only clarify from my time there. I was there for 11 years. I wasn't there for the whole project. There were people that preceded me, Gil Freitag, Laura Schreibman, Bob Cagle, and there was very few people after me. I was the last generation, essentially, that did the research there. So I can only talk about our generation, what we did. I've seen this up now twice. I just want to say, these were the pioneering days of autism. This is the 1960s. This is when children were self-injurious, mutilating themselves, and their lives are in jeopardy. It was crude what they did, absolutely. But they also noted in the article that, got to go back, they noted in the article about the tremendous amount of reinforcement, how compassionate people were, the love that was being shown. That was back in the 60s. In my generation, we were incredibly different than the previous generations. We stopped using physical punishment in my generation. In my generation, we used group work. In my generation, we were just different. So when I hear things like the Lovaas model, I don't know what the hell that is. I don't know what the Lovaas model is. Is that Bob's generation? Is that Tom's generation? Is that my generation? There was no such thing as the model. Ivar hated being called the Lovaas model because it was a fluid, dynamic model, ever-changing. The insanity in the field, there's a Lovaas model. There isn't. There just plainly isn't. People may think there is. They don't understand what we do. And they're going to do bad ABA for the most part. I heard this, the vaccine as a cause of autism. Oh my God, there's no data for that. It's absolutely not supported whatsoever. Absolutely no data that thimerosal has a cause. It came from one fraudulent study. It's been shown time and time again. But if you're not a critical thinker, you may think that, or you should listen to Donald Trump. Non-evidence-based treatments, we've got to stop that. We've got to stop rigid ABA, and we've got to train our people. All too often, the reason I think ABA is not doing well is there's not enough training. ABA has become McDonald's. The demand is high, the supply is low, so let's get them in and out in 1 or 2 weeks. It doesn't work that way, as I said earlier on. We're not going to get quality interventions when we do that. We're going to have to be McDonald's, where the pickle goes the same place and the mustard and everything's exact same no matter where you go with McDonald's. We've got to at least be better than that. And that comes down to training. It comes down to what we train to. One of my criticisms with the exam, the BCBA exam, is it's so narrow and limited in what they teach. There's more to what we do. We've got to make it a wider focus and teach other things. It's not all about prompting. Shaping is an important aspect of what we do, and there's got to be equal emphasis on that. There's got to be understanding that respondent conditioning is very much important as operant conditioning. We've got to train people at emotional regulation. We've got to work about frustration tolerance. We've got to be teaching these things. We've got to be clinicians with our staff and with our parents. And we absolutely should not put parents in the role of teachers and therapists. I totally agree. It's a mistake we made at UCLA. We did that, and we learned our lesson. When you parents in a role of being a teacher, a therapist, you're changing mommy and daddy, and you're ruining lives and marriages. And so we've got to understand as a clinician what we're doing and how we're doing it. We can do better. Kids with autism have amazing, amazing potential, as adults do and adolescents. Thank you for listening to my rants. In my career, I've seen some amazing changes in the field of autism. Today, there's an understanding that children with ASD have incredible... For listening to my rants.